the first time that I ever had a Zoom experience at Elaine's Hope, which is the assisted living facility where Elaine is. We had breakfast this morning, and then I thought, well, rather than go home, I would just stay here and set up camp. And so, but you're in a conference room here over at Elaine's Hope, and what I came about sort of by happenstance, but something, sort of pretty important to me and Elaine. If you can see that picture in the back, that's called Sunrise. And what it is, it's a picture of a sailboat at anchor. And of course, you can see the sort of the brightness. And the point being that, and by the way, it was painted by my oldest son, Marty. And the point being that no matter how foreboding things are, the sun will always rise and always be a new day. And that has been so helpful to me to make sure that I understand that, because we all know the heroics of caregiving, but we also know the challenging aspects of being a caregiver. One other really great situation here is I never had a clock grow out of my head before. And so for those of you that double think that I walk around with this clock on my head all the time, that's not true. It's only when I am presenting to you. And so this is the ADRC in Portage County, is that correct?
Correct.
And ADRC in Portage County is the only county I have ever talked to where a clock was actually growing out of my head. And so if you do see me without a clock over my head, that's still okay, because I'm still, But anyway, so I don't know. Did I lose? Oh, there we go. So my two Elaines, have they had, Carly, have they had a chance to look at the book?
Some people have, yeah. I have about 8 copies in my office that are never ever here and available, but quite a few people have read your book.
Okay, well, good. And I don't know if you, I think I want to. Well, you're gonna think this is bragging, but I wanted to just show this book that people have actually, Carly, picked up this book and started to read it and could not put it down. And I want to explain that, and sort of bragging. But anyway, but they would start and couldn't. So you see how shiny this is? That's like a lacquer, like a shellac. And a year ago, January, I was running short of these books. And in running short of these books, I went to the printer. I said, I need books as quickly as possible. Well, not only did he get the books done on time, but also ahead of schedule, which was really something. However, again, this goes back to the lacquer. He did not let that varnish or that lacquer dry, and it became sticky. So what happened is people picked up the book, they started to read it, they wanted to do something different, and they couldn't put it down. And so that's pretty neat to all of you in Portage County to be able to talking to an author who wrote a book that some people just could not put down. That's really pretty special. So anyway, it's good to be with you all. Isn't it great to have spring weather coming and to have the COVID now behind us? And over here at Elaine's Hope Assisted Living, where Elaine is, we still wear the masks and so forth, but they say you're pretty safe if you've been vaccinated, which I have. Carly, have you been vaccinated?
I sure have.
Yeah, good. So, in talking to you, particularly about Elaine's hope, or my two Elaines, I think one of the most important things for caregivers to understand is to acknowledge that it is one of the very toughest jobs in the world. And what I have come to learn about this is I talk in the book about how I understand and came to know that all of the Army's marching, all of the Navy sailing, all of the beer that's brewed, all of the alcohol that is distilled does not stop this disease. 18 years ago, when Elaine was first diagnosed, this was number 6 of the top 10 killers. And at that time, it could not be cured, delayed, or prevented. Now it's 18 years later. It's not number 6 because of COVID, but it's still among the top 10 killers. it is still the only disease that cannot be cured, delayed, or prevented. So when we caregivers embark on this journey, we have to understand that this is a journey that's probably going to change us. But also, we should understand that this journey has the possibility of giving us a chance to see insights into our loved one, insights into ourselves, and also to make friends who have been able to, well, when our loved one becomes ill and their memory is fading, their mind is falling, what happens is that leaves such a big hole in our heart. And I think what we as caregivers begin to understand that we will be meeting people, maybe through ADRC, maybe through the Alzheimer's Association, maybe through volunteer groups, maybe through neighbors that we never had pay attention to us before, but we're going to be finding people who are going to be so loving and caring and understanding that they will help us fill that hole. And so within that framework, then how much we are able to deal with this disease, with being a caregiver, the toughest job in the world, depends so much on our own outlook. And if we approach this as the end of the world, it's going to be a lot tougher. If we sort of look at this as, well, rather than worrying about the storm to pass, to try and learn how to dance in the rain. And when I say how to dance in the rain, we can look for moments of joy. We can be like a detective and find out. Now, to give you an example of this moments of joy, of things I should have learned sooner, the things I'm sorry I learned too late or wish I would have learned at an earlier period of time. When Elaine was diagnosed, the doctor said there are 4 things that we should be doing. Certainly Numenda and Aricept, that's number 1. Well, it does not delay the disease, but it may delay some of the symptoms. But then the second, socialization, to make sure that there is that social contact. And then third is walking. Walking by far is the best exercise for the brain. And then fourthly, a glass of red wine every evening. Well, Elaine got like 4 weeks ahead with the glass of red wine and 3 weeks behind in the walking. But so I was very sane and sensible and determined to help out Elaine. And so walking, I was going to get in 1/2 hour of walking every day. And so we would be walking and Elaine would say, oh, look at that beautiful flower. Well, come on, Elaine, we have to walk along and get our walk in. And or there would be a bird, look at the bird. Or the point is that I was worrying about the storm to pass rather than learning how to dance in the rain. And now I understand how important it would have been for her if I would have said, Elaine, let's stop and look at that bird, or let's look at that flower and let's appreciate the moment. Let's have these moments of joy together. And we will find those moments of joy if we are open to it. And so much of what we as people, as caregivers, end up doing, again, is dependent upon what we have in our own minds. As I tried to explain in the book, if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. And when I say ignorance of the disease, I mean by the medical profession, generally maybe not understanding that when there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, there are 2 patients, the person who is ill and also the caregiver. But also ignorance of the disease by me, the caregiver. As I said, I didn't understand the ability to look for moments of joy. I didn't understand the kind of journey I was going to be going on, but also ignorance of the disease, by churches and by parishes and by synagogues, by men and women of the cloth, ignorance of the disease by attorneys and financial advisors, by neighbors. So one of the points that comes to my mind is when I talk about ignorance of the disease, and that is the fact that this is not a chicken casserole disease. We caregivers have found out that if you take by comparison going to the hospital and having heart surgery and you come home, generally neighbors and friends may bring over chicken casserole. Or if you fall and you break your hip, well, they maybe bring over chicken casserole. But with Alzheimer's, people don't know how to handle it. And when they begin to see mental deficiencies in someone, because they don't know how to handle it, they begin to shy away. So then what happens to the caregiver is not only is the caregiver dealing with one great big anxiety and worry, but also we get the perception that our friends are leaving us. And so, for example, if Elaine and I had friends for 20 years, 30 years maybe, that we went skiing with and played bridge. Well, that's what was the common focus of us being together. Now all of a sudden we don't ski anymore and we can't play bridge anymore. And that relationship, that friendship begins to break apart. And that makes the challenge of a caregiver even that much greater. Another challenge that we have is we do not recognize um, the grieving, it unacknowledged grieving. If well, I had a good friend, and that friend retired from a lifetime of work, and he's into his retirement for a few weeks, and lo and behold, he has dinner in the evening. He lays down, and he has a massive heart attack, and he dies. Well, that was tragic, extremely unfortunate, making us all very, very sad. But the fact of the matter is that there was a funeral, there was closure, and because of that, then there was a better chance of going on with one's life. Of course, with grief, and of course with the memories, but the chance to go on. As a caregiver, we have this unacknowledged grieving where we see our loved one die a little bit every day, and we don't realize that we are suffering this loss, and then that grieving is a normal process. But then also depression. I mean, um, gosh, Carly, if there's one thing that has come across, regardless of where I'm visiting with people, whether it's California, New England, Texas, Florida, Milwaukee, Portage County, the guilt, the guilt that caregivers feel and carry around with them. So unfortunate, but I understand why that guilt is there. That guilt is there because we do everything we can to try and help our loved one. And every day is a new beginning. We think we've just about solved our problems. We think we've just about dealt with the issue. And lo and behold, because this disease is regressive, we are ending up being worse today than we were yesterday, regardless of the amount of time and energy and love and frustration that we put into it. And so now we begin to feel guilty because now we're saying, well, maybe what we're doing it wrong, so I have to put more into it. And the more we put into it, the more we take away from our own personal opportunity to be well-being. So we maybe don't get enough sleep. Maybe we don't get enough exercise. Maybe we don't eat right. Maybe because we're not sleeping right and eating right and not getting enough exercise, we're becoming very irritable. And now, if we want things in our life to help us, that anger and so forth comes out, and we're doing nobody any good. So we caregivers have to look at ourselves as a lifeline. And when I say look at ourselves as a lifeline, if you can envision, someone going overboard on a boat, and you have this life ring to throw them, and they can grab onto that, and they can be made safe. Well, whoever would take a life ring and throw it to someone who is drowning, knowing that that lifeline is frayed, that as soon as that someone grabs it, it's not going to be of any use. I use that as an analogy so we caregivers understand something very, very important and so very, very clear, and that we to our loved one are lifelines. Now, do we want to throw a lifeline to our loved one that's frayed and going to break apart? Or do we want to throw a lifeline that is strong? Here is what makes a very weak lifeline: ourselves. What makes us a weak lifeline is by not getting enough sleep, by not having the proper food, by not taking the proper time for some respite for ourselves, by not planting the positive thoughts in our heads. I can tell you that because I wasn't getting enough sleep, because I wasn't getting enough exercise, because I wasn't getting enough opportunity for some respite, because I wasn't planting positive thoughts in my mind, what happened was I was not a very good caregiver for Elaine, but not only not a very good caregiver for Elaine, but I was harming myself. And so what we have to understand is that we need to take care of ourselves in order for us to take care of our loved one. What also made it so very, very difficult, and we caregivers know this, and that is the passion, the desire to want to not let go, to always try and keep our loved one in our lives. And so with Elaine, she would come up with stories, that really never occurred. And I would try and pull her back. No, Elaine, it didn't happen that way. She would ask how her parents were. I'd say they're both dead. Well, in her world, she was shocked because maybe she didn't say goodbye, because maybe she didn't even go to the funeral. So once I began to understand that by trying to pull her back into my world, I was not doing anyone any good, her or myself. And that underscores the basic premise that if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. How do we fight an enemy? We fight an enemy by better trying to understand that enemy as to how we can beat it, and to understand this disease, to know that we've got to join the life of and the world of our loved one. But then we get to probably one of the most difficult stages, and that is to understand that we have to let go of this person who once was, because that person is no more. What we have to do is let go of this person who once was, so that we can now embrace the person who now is. That's so difficult. And what happens is it's just not the snap of a finger. Aha, I'm letting go of this person who once was, and I can now embrace this person who now is. It's a gradual process. I sort of call it death by 1,000 cuts. But once finally that realization comes about to a greater degree, life is so much better and so much easier, not only for ourselves, but also for our loved one who is ill. And so, uh, being a being a caregiver is probably, as I said, one of the toughest jobs in the world, because as a caregiver, we're dealing with and facing with emotional, psychological, physical, grieving, depression, anxiety, all of those things, which are very, very natural kinds of experiences, even anger and frustration. Uh, I had a mentor. I called up the mentor one time. I said, "Do you ever just really feel like screaming?" And the mentor says, "Not only do I really feel like screaming, but I actually scream." And so caregivers have to understand that they're not alone in their feelings and in their emotions, but also there's help there. The ADRC, Carly, the work that you and your team does is just truly outstanding. And when I think about what I have gone through as a caregiver, and when I understand what other caregivers are going through, to know that there is someone to be helpful, that can give us some guidance, that ends up being such a rich, such a wonderful kind of thing for us, and really for our community. So I want to thank you and the whole ADRC team for what they do. And when I say that, if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. Just as this fellow's driving along in his car, and as he's driving along in his car, he comes across a body in the road, and so he gets out and very seriously injured. So he quickly gets on his phone. He calls the emergency medical team. He says, and he says 911. He says, "Send help right away. There's a body in the road, and it's very, very seriously injured." The dispatcher says, "Yes, sir. We will send help. Where are you?" "Well," he says, "Help right away. I'm over here on Pistachio Street." The dispatcher says, sir, we will send help. How do you spell pistachio? He says, spell pistachio. He says, you got to send help. He said, the dispatcher says, sir, we have to get the emergency medical team to the right place. How do you spell pistachio? Well, the man says, never mind. He says, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. The dispatcher says, sir, I thought you said this man is seriously injured. Why are you going to call us back in 5 minutes? Well, the man said, I'm going to drag the body over to Elm. So not everyone knows how to spell pistachio. Okay, not everyone knows how to handle Alzheimer's. And through ADRC, we're able to learn and understand more. But then one thing also that we as caregivers have to know, unfortunately, it does not come instinctively. Unfortunately, maybe sometimes it has to be, pushed into our head. But it is not a sign of weakness to ask for help. As a caregiver, it is a sign of courage and it is a sign of intelligence to ask for help. They say that 18% of the caregivers die before their loved ones. Now, maybe because of natural causes, of course, but also I know as a fact that some deaths of caregivers are caused simply because all of the emotions, the psychological, the physical aspects where people do not take care of themselves. Now, one thing that I learned is that when you are under stress, the fight or the flee, what happens is our body releases a chemical called cortisol, and that is released before the release of adrenaline. If our bodies release too much cortisol, it causes weight gain, it causes any number of illnesses, and guess what it also causes? It causes dementia. And so here we want to be a strong life. Well, first of all, we're going through absolutely through because we're losing our loved one. We want to help them out the best we can. We'll be willing to work 28 hours a day to do that. So we're all willing to do that. But why don't we do the right thing and having our best ability to help our loved one? Why don't we do the right thing and first taking care of ourselves so that we in turn have the strength, the psychological ability to deal with things? Why don't we make sure we get the proper diet, the proper sleep, ask for help, make sure that all things that we need to do to keep ourselves healthy are things that we understand we're doing not only for ourselves, but more importantly, for the ability for us to help our loved ones. So what thought I would do, Carly, is before we open it up for questions, I would read a few of Elaine. So here's, by the way, I want you to know we have a website, my2elaines.com. If you want to buy any additional books, go to that website because you'll get a better price on the book than if you go through Amazon and so forth. And also we put out a monthly newsletter. If anyone is interested in that, they can please sign up for that. That's absolutely free of any kind of charge. So anyway, Elaine has been on this journey now, as I said, for 18 years. And it's been now 5.5 years roughly at assisted living memory care here. And I began to understand how really difficult caregiving is. And I began to think if I could only help some caregivers who are about to go on this journey, that would make such a difference, not only in their lives, but it would make me feel very happy because I will have helped someone. It's sort of like there's a very rugged path that someone has to travel, and there's who knows what kinds of pitfalls are on that journey. And so before the person starts out on that journey, I want to say, please sit down with me for a moment and let's just talk a little bit. I want to tell you what's ahead so you are better able to handle it. I'm not going to be able to remove many of the obstacles, but I at least can tell you how to deal with these obstacles and maybe how to handle them to the best of your ability. So I write the book. I write the book on things I wish I would have known sooner, things that I learned too late, hoping to help caregivers. Lo and behold, before I am ready to go to print, maybe 3 to 4 weeks, I find a series of notes and journals and diaries that Elaine had been keeping since her diagnosis. And so I went through these notes with my daughter, Kathy, and daughter, Christine, and we extracted some of the notes which we felt were very important for caregivers to understand based on the experience of a person who was going through the the Alzheimer's journey in just going through the Alzheimer's journey. And so I want you to know, everyone, that even though Elaine and I had prayed together and we had cried together, I want you to know never did I understand the courage that it takes to be diagnosed with this illness and then go forward. But the other thing that I learned, which is so important, I never really fully understood how much Elaine depended upon me as her lifeline. Now, as much as I might love her, to not take care of myself, to not understand how important I am as her lifeline, gosh, that was sure a big mistake. And hopefully I found out about it before it was absolutely too late. So anyway, we went through her notes and diaries, and I want to read just a few of them for you to get a sense. Now, upon early diagnosis, uh, she wrote this. She said, "It wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and schedules. I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better and realized I am not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it." A few notes about what she said about me, and this is not for self grandizement, but it's to drive home to every caregiver how important they are in the life of their loved one. She writes, "My Marty, who is and always has been my strength and comfort, I thank God every day for his understanding and loving ways." Then also, she writes, on another time, she writes, "I would be so lost without you. So please continue to take good care of yourself for me as well as for you." Now, there's this period of time where, as the disease progresses, where there is acknowledgement of what is going on, and then sometimes denial. Now, I just read how great I am in her eyes, but look at here's something from her journal when she writes, "I am not enjoying my role anymore as Marty's wife. Because of his having concerns about my Alzheimer's, he doesn't let me be me. He doesn't let me go for a walk if I want to, or to the store alone. I used to appreciate him when I felt was concerned, but he holds me captive, much too much. I'm going to try to have a second opinion because I really don't think I have any problem. I know how to drive or walk any place, but he doesn't believe me, and I hate the control he has placed on me. And I don't even think I have Alzheimer's per se." And so, what a challenge our loved ones have as they work to deal and handle this matter of dementia. What I want to read one more to give you sort of a sense. Here she writes, this date of this is unknown, but she writes, "I wish my Alzheimer's would dissipate. I'd like to be the smart wife and mother I used to be. Now I have to waste so much time just trying to figure out what I should be doing without seeming as smart as I used to be. I need to rely on Marty for everything, and I'm very lucky he continues to keep me. Life gets more difficult every day." And then the last one that I will read, but also my very favorite. This is from July 3rd of 2012. And she writes, "Life is good, and I plan to have it continue that way until my children tell me it's time for a nursing home or something like that. This is realistic with what my Alzheimer's book says about my future. But till then, I will try my best to be normal, whatever that means, and keep my happy side of life always continuing. I'm lucky to have such a good family and many friends help me get through all this. And so another great day to thank the Lord and smile, smile, smile. So those are some of Elaine's writings, but I want to just talk a moment before we open it up for any questions that or comments people may have, and that is the importance of prayer, patience, and persistence. And so important. And to make that point, there was this woman who had this parrot, and this woman graduated with a couple of degrees, doctorate degrees from the university, and she was having company for the weekend. And well, she had this parrot, and all this parrot would say was, "Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party." Well, she knew, she felt, she thought that if her friends would come over to visit, very well educated, and the only words that her parrot would know would be "Polly wants a party," they would certainly think less of her. And she was worried about what they would think. She was so worried, in fact, that she went to see her priest. And she says, "Father," she said, "you have to help me. I do not know what to do. I have this parrot that says, 'Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party.' My friends are coming to see me. They're going to hear that's the only words the parrot knows, but they're going to think not well of me." The priest said, "This is a miracle." He says, "This is a miracle." He said, "Because I myself have two parrots, Peter Parrot and Paul Parrot." He said, "I've had them for 7 years." And he said, "All they do is pray. They pray all the time, every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year for 7 years, they've been doing nothing but praying." And so what we should do is to take your parrot and put it in with my parrots, Peter Parrot and Paul Parrot, and my parrots will be a good influence on your parrot. They agreed. So the lady goes home, gets her parrot, they bring it in and into the priest's home, and they open up the cage and they put the lady's parrot in. Sure enough, "Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party." Well, Peter Parrot looked at Paul Parrot and said, "Our prayers have finally been answered." All right. So any thoughts or questions? Thanks a lot, Carly, again, for you and your team for all that you do, and for everyone who's on this. I did live in Stevens Point for a bit of time. In 1978, after I lost the election for governor, I moved to a hobby farm out there. They used to call it Highway P, but I think it's Highway 67 now, along parallel with the Wisconsin River. And so Elaine had an antique store. And here I am, a former governor, going into people's basements and hauling out furniture and dusting off things and so on. But she did everything. Without Elaine, I don't think I would have been anything. And she helped me with, and so when she told me she wanted to have an antique store, I thought, wow, if that's what she would want, that's what I would want her to have. So out there on Highway P, or now 67, we bought a little, like a hobby farm, and Elaine had her antique store, and she called it Cranberry Corners. And it turned out to be quite a good experience for her, and I know she liked it, and certainly we didn't make any money at it, but that wasn't the goal. And then we also raised goats and sheep, and we had some polled white-faced Herefords. We had some horses, and so we had quite a menagerie of, And so, I had this horse. I always wanted to have a horse ever since I was a little kid. And so I found this horse that was for sale that was only half trained, but was cheap. So what I did was I bought the horse, and then I got in contact with a horse trainer. And so what would happen is every Saturday morning, the horse trainer would come for an hour, and he would teach me how to train this horse. And so the horse's name was Brianna, but for the purpose of this story, to make it more exciting, the horse's name is Thunderbolt Killer. And so Thunderbolt Killer and I would work out. First, the trainer would tell us in the Saturday morning what to do, and then I would work with the horse in spare time during the week. And if you can remember Ronald Reagan, he said there's nothing like the outside of a horse to make the inside of a man feel good. But anyway, so I worked with Thunderbolt Killer. So now what happened is we're making progress, and now the day comes for me to sit on the horse, and I get on the horse, and I say walk, and the horse walks. I say whoa, and the horse whoas. All of a sudden, a rabbit jumped out from behind the bush, frightened Thunderbolt Killer so much he began to buck and to jump so very, very much that my right foot come out of the stirrup, and the horse's right rear foot get caught in the stirrup. So I tapped the horse on the shoulder. I said, look, I said, if you're getting on, I'm getting off. We miss Portage County. My son Marty lives there. And also my granddaughter, Emily is there, and also my grandson, Jordan is there too.
Very cool. So a question I think that comes up a lot is, you find humor in a lot of the changes in the journey, but when did you realize that you needed help? Did somebody from the outside tell you, or did you realize that on your own?
Basically, we had almost like an intervention with my children telling me that I've got to start taking care of myself. In the book, I talk about the fact that I went through hundreds of thousands of dollars of testing, because what happened was my health was failing. I had trouble breathing. Fluid was accumulating around my lungs. I couldn't walk hardly very far at all. And when I say Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse, this is my fault as well as the medical profession's fault. But the fact of the matter is, no one stepped back and say, why is this person who's ordinarily been very healthy, why all of a sudden is he having trouble breathing? Why all of a sudden is he feeling discomfort? Well, the fact of the matter is, as a caregiver, we have to understand that caregivers go through a lot of stress, and that was impacting on my health. And so almost maybe like osmosis, but the main thing was when my children sat me down and they say, Dad, you got to start taking care of yourself, because we all know we're losing Mom. We don't want to lose two parents. And so that underscores, again, the fact, please understand, caregivers, that if you are taking care of yourself, you are not only helping your loved one who is ill, but you're also making sure that you are in a position to be a parent, a grandparent, a friend, a neighbor to others, and to be able to share your love and your caring and your concern.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Marty? You can unmute yourselves, or you can put it in the chat and I can read those comments or questions as well. I think that's one thing that's very helpful in your presentations, Marty, is how you can make people laugh. I think a lot of people think that if they laugh during their caregiving journey that, you know, they're mocking something, or it's just not a situation to laugh at. And I think in the book too, you mentioned that humor is really important to kind of go through the grieving process too, as you're trying to be a caregiver and navigate that journey as well.
One of the words that that comes up many times is permission. Caregivers we have permission. We have to give ourselves permission. We have to give ourselves permission to laugh. Why? Because again, that caregiving is so intense. We have to give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves. We have to give ourselves permission to understand that if we really want to be of help and caring to our loved one, that we need permission to get the right amount of sleep, give ourselves permission to eat right, and so on. And so even permission to get angry, and give ourselves permission to grieve, permission to even sit down and cry, to have a good cry. Again, we get uptight. Because we get uptight because we don't know what to do next, and it's not getting better, and it's all beginning to close in on us, and then we're beginning to feel like a failure. Well, we have to give ourselves permission to understand that you're a real hero, permission to understand that you're absolutely doing your best and no one could ever do it better. We have to give ourselves permission to be courageous and intelligent, to ask for help. but permission becomes so important. And this whole business of humor, oh gosh, I don't know where I would be, you know. Um, so if I can make people laugh and and help them understand that they need to be giving themselves permission, and then actually do give themselves permission, that'd be really great. Oh, you should know we had on the farm, I said pulled white-faced Herefords, didn't I? But anyway, so we wanted to do, we wanted to raise some additional beef cows. So what happened is I went and I bought a bull. And so I haven't shared this story with too many people. So anyway, so the bull that I bought was from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So what happened was I went to Green Bay and I got the bull. It was an expensive bull too. So I bring the bull back into Cranberry Corners, into where we had our little hobby farm. And so I pull the trailer in. The bull gets out of the trailer and he in the field, and he sniffs a little bit, and he just stands there. And he's kept on standing there. Nothing is going on with this bull. Paid a lot of money for him. So I said, hey, I went to the veterinarian. I said, I've got this bull. I paid a lot of money. And this bull is just, is just standing there and not doing anything. Well, the veterinarian said, where did you get the bull from? I said, well, I got him over from the Green Bay area. Well, he said, because of Green Bay and Lake Michigan, there's a lot of moisture in the air. He said, and what happens is because of all of the moisture in the air, there's a different impact on digestion and so forth. So he gave me some powder. He says, give this to the bull. So I went home and I gave the bull this powder, and this bull, he took some of that powder and he romanced every cow in with 3 or 4 in my area. And then he busted through the fence and he romanced every cow within that area, and he moved even into the next county. And gosh, I don't know what that was, that powder, but it tastes like mint.
Oh, too funny.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? I know it's a quiet group. Any questions or comments for Margie? Or you guys are still laughing because that was funny.
Well, I can tell you about my rooster. I got time. What time is it? Oh,
Yes.
40.
I don't see any other questions. Another question, I think, for when you transition, Elaine, to memory care, how did you personally kind of accept that and move forward? Because I know that's sometimes hard to give up the role as a caregiver, that nobody can care for your loved one as good as you. How did you transition, and what supports did you have in place to help you with that?
First of all, it was the most difficult, agonizing, miserable experiences I think I've ever had. I was fortunate to be with the Alzheimer's Association. I was fortunate that they would provide me with a counselor. And so I'm meeting with the counselor, and I said, I just cannot see putting Elaine into a nursing home. Linda Market, my counselor, said, you are not putting Elaine anyplace. You are giving her an opportunity to be who she is now. Can Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home care take care of her? Well, the answer to that was no. I was sleeping near the door at night for fear she would go out into the street. I was becoming more irrationally irritable. My health was being affected. All of those things were coming to being, and there was no way that I could give her that 24/7 nursing home care. And so that was one of the factors that led to this decision. I said this intervention with my children. They drove home the point that I had better start taking care of myself, or I might be dead before their mom. And so a lot of times we think that the marriage vows, till death do us part, means that we have to put our loved one at risk health-wise. We have to put our own life at risk health-wise in order to fulfill that marriage vow. Well, I believe, and I've talked with people of the cloth, that that's not what that all means. It means certainly that till death do us part means that we have to do everything we can to help each other live our best lives possible and be healthy. That then began to sink into me, and was just a little bit more comforting. But also, when I was looking for an assisted living home for Elaine, I took someone with me to make sure that I would have a chance to talk with someone, and that 4 eyes is better than 2 eyes. And as we visited different assisted living facilities, there are many great ones out there, but there are some that are better fits than others. So we looked at what kind of programs they had. We looked at how the food is being presented, and the taste of the food. We looked at the quality of housekeeping, and even breathing the air. And so we also found that there are assisted living homes, facilities, where the staff is just outstanding. And you may not necessarily choose that particular home, assisted living facility, but they certainly will help give you better understanding. And again, this is not an it is not an easy task. It is so difficult. I mean, now Elaine and I, within a few weeks, will be married for 60 years. So at the time that we were looking at nursing homes for Elaine, that means that we were married. What would it be, for 54 years? And any married couple, any married couple that has been together, I don't care for any length of time, to think about separating yourself from your loved one now for the rest of your life. I mean, that's heavy stuff. And caregivers have to acknowledge that. But then you have to acknowledge and look at what is in the best interest of your loved one, what is in the best interest of yourself. And it's sort of like a scale: the health of the caregiver, the health of the person who is ill. And when that becomes out of whack, when one of those healths are begin to be affected, that's when you've got to start being more serious about this. Also, anyone else's health and safety. Could there be some action that might be taken by the person who is ill that could start a fire or could lead to someone else's? So anyway, I can remember when I brought Elaine here to the assisted living facility. It was the day after Labor Day. And I had made arrangements over the weekend to get some of Elaine's furniture here so she might be able to feel more comfortable. All the time we were going to daycare, and I said, we're going to daycare. And as we walked out of the home, the door, she followed me and she left the door open. I did not have the heart to ask her to close that door. So we came here, and the staff was just outstanding, and it was just so difficult. For those of us with children who took our first child to kindergarten and knew that we didn't want to part with them, and knew how difficult this was, and child was crying and so forth. Well, it's sort of akin to that, but maybe even a little bit more deeper. But it's something that had to be done. And now my life is better. Elaine's life is better. My children have a better parent. My grandchildren have a better grandfather and a better grandmother. And so that's really special. So anyway, so now I'm leaving the assisted living facility. I'm in the parking lot. Well, as I said, this was where Elaine also was coming for daycare. And as I'm in the park, it was a beautiful day. I remember the sun was shining. So as I'm leaving, one of the men who also went to the daycare, one of the men said, he says, you've got a beautiful blue shirt. Could I have that blue shirt? Sure, I said, and I just happened to have an extra shirt in the car. So I said, come on over with me. I went over to where my car was parked. I opened the door and I took out my other shirt. I took off my blue shirt and I gave it to him. Oh, he says, I love this blue shirt. And so then rumors started around that Marty Schreiber is really nice, because he gave this man the shirt off his back. Well, little does anyone know that I had just robbed a 7-Eleven store wearing this blue shirt. And so the police officers were looking for a short, fat guy with a blue shirt. Now, all of a sudden, they've got the blue shirt with a tall guy with a mustache. And so it's worked out perfectly.
Oh, funny. Any last minute comments or questions for Marty? There's a chat that says very powerful, insightful, and genuine words and advice. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you.
All right, I don't see any other questions or comments, but thank you so much, Marty, for taking time out of your day to share your story and share some laughs that caregivers can relate to. Is this journey is not easy. It's not easy for anybody involved, and you help spread kind of positivity and humor as people are kind of coping through the journey that no one really knows what's next. So I greatly appreciate you presenting for us today.
Well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure and my honor, and hi to everyone out there in Portage County.
And have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the somewhat sunshine we've got going on. And then have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.